So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Scott DeLong, and I wrote a book, and we're here to talk about that. So I see some familiar faces, and I see some names that I haven't met before. So I appreciate that. Actually, some old friends, some old clients, and a whole bunch of other folks as well. So I'm going to ask you to do something, and it's not a requirement, but it's really helpful for me. I'll tell you a little bit more about that. If you're comfortable, please turn on your camera. I want to see some faces if I can. It helps me connect with the audience, see who I'm talking to, how they're relating to things, and where we can go from there. So while I can't force you to turn on your camera, I'm going to ask you to. So give you a second to do that. And some of you, I'm sure you're in a position where you can't, and I appreciate that as well. Okay, we'll start again. Scott DeLong wrote a book called I Thought I Was a Leader. A lot of this book has to do with my story and my transformation from who I was growing up, always believing I was in a leadership position, whether that was from sports to education to businesses. And I've been running businesses for the past, I don't know, I started my first one when I was 16, went on the corporate world a little bit after that, and then came back and ran businesses, and always thought that I was in this leadership position. It wasn't until, and the other part of that is that I considered myself successful. It felt like I was getting places and doing the things that I wanted to do. About 13 years ago, 50 hit me, and things changed. Got this like vision, a dream. It really wasn't a dream, that of what I wanted a life to look like. And it wasn't the life that I had built. It wasn't all about what I was defining as success back then, which was, well, my definition hasn't changed much, but my interpretation of the definition has. The success to me was if I could exceed my parents' expectations, that would be successful. I grew up in a lower middle class family, and I thought that their definition of success was for me to acquire things and get stuff and have nice cars and better houses and all of those kind of things. And that's what I was striving for, is to make my parents proud based on the things that I was getting and the places and how I was getting them. Both my parents have since passed, and what I realized in that time is that I created their definition of success, not the one that they probably really had. You see, a lot of you folks are probably parents as well. And my definition for success for my children is to be a good person. So I started this journey to be a better person, and therefore a better leader. And I started going back to school. I joined a group called Entrepreneur Organization. And unfortunately, I got involved in the Nar-Anon world. We had a child that was really struggling with addiction issues, and found that to be a comforting kind of place. And it was interesting that all three of these things converged at the same time to me, which is what helped form and change the way that I act or want to act. Don't always act appropriately still in this transitional process and learning. But it was interesting to me, and as I look back, I would not have come up with this transformation in my own life had these things not converged at the same time. One of those places, EO by itself, would not have made me learn the lesson, nor would going back to get in my education, and nor would have the Al-Anon, Nar-Anon. I had to be hit on the head with a 2x4. It took all three of these things converging for me to be able to get it. Now, get it means, to me, it was a process of self-reflection. And that's what this book really has a lot to do with. It's a journey of self-reflection and the thinking that the things that I thought I wanted, and those not producing the types of results that I was looking for. There's some stories in the front of the book that talk about that, and I'm happy to share that as well. But I don't want to get too deep into who I am, because there's a lot of people that I want to introduce that are here that helped me write this book. And when I say help me write this book, I got the feeling after, well, I started with a developmental editor, a lady named Courtney Jorstad, who said, yeah, I would like to help you on that. She was a former client, And she thought it would be an interesting project to work on. Unfortunately, Courtney didn't have the time to devote that it needed. So she turned me on to one of her peers, former peers, who ends up being my co-author on this, and that's Sarah Mirando. But there are other people involved as well. John Miller, who introduced himself earlier. John did all the graphics in the book. He took all the content that is available to upload and put that on our website so that you can grab that as well as you're going through the book, the exercises and the surveys that we've put together and all that. So John did all of that for me. He actually developed the cover of the book as well, which I'll show you in a few minutes as we get through this. And then I had some other editors as well. So besides Courtney, who was always involved, even though she couldn't do this for a project anymore, she wanted to stay involved, which is a really cool thing to have happen for me. Marla Markman was also a copy editor who corrected my grammar and put the periods in the right places and used an exclamation point when it belonged, because that's not what I do. Right. And then we had a format editor, Rebecca Saraceno, who also helped with this process. So, and then we have one more person brand new to the group, and that's Abby Griffith. And I think Abby's online as well. And Abby is the person you probably interacted with the social media that led you to this place. In fact, but my point is that it takes a village. Right. Since the pandemic, I've been working in my home office by myself with my clients. Right. And I love working with clients. The kind of work that I do coaching, I teach leadership, communication, building trust, things like that. And when I get to work with my clients, I like life. The problem is I'm by myself a lot, sitting here in a room trying to write or do whatever the rest of my work. But when I got together with these other 6 people, it was a team, and it was so cool. I mean, I got off one meeting, I remember, where I said very little because everything else was going on. So I want to give a lot of credit to the people that helped me write this book. There's actually another group of people that helped with this as well. I had, as I finished each chapter, I sent the chapter out to 5 or 6 different people, peers. Some were former clients, some were future clients, right? Some were business owners that are, competitors. And I asked them to critique each chapter. And it was amazing, some of the work that these people did and came back to. And all of this together made the book a much better work, right? Some of the original critique that I got really helped inform the later chapters. And it was really cool to get the involvement. There were like 44 people involved in that group that would actually critique work and send it back and challenge my assertions and say, you sure that's what you want to say? Is this what that means? Those kind of questions. And it was really, really helpful in that. So the process was cumbersome. It was deep. It took a lot more than I thought it was going to take to be able to write a book. I have all these thoughts and ideas, and I have all this research that I've done and read and thought we'd put the book together. Well, I'm going to tell you, start to finish, it's a year-long process. And that's knowing all the information that I thought I knew already, right? So I wanted to let you know what writing a book does, and it's very rare that you can do one on your own. So as we get to the end, if anyone has any questions on the process, I'm happy to help with that as well, because it's completely different than what I had thought it was going to be. All right. I'd like to introduce Sarah Mirando. Is Sarah on right now? She might not be. Once she gets on, I'm going to introduce her. She became the co-author to the book. Brought her on as a developmental editor to say, hey, check this, challenge that, kind of on the process and the writing and all that. And she just got so involved in this project that I just could not keep her name off the title. In fact, she wrote the foreword for the book on all by herself. I didn't give any guidance or any of that for the foreword. So she wrote that directly. So I want to give a lot of credit to Sarah for that. And I hope that she gets on here, because I'd like for her to introduce herself and tell a little bit about her story. So why I wrote the book. The audience that I thought I was writing it for is really not the audience that I ended up writing it for. I thought I was writing it for folks like me, 60-year-old guys who've been running their businesses all their life, that 60-year-old white guys. I'm just saying, like, we fit in this little box, right? And have all these thoughts and ideas, the whole command and control leadership that we grew up with, the things that our first bosses taught us, and we just did so well and became successful. I thought I was writing to those folks to let them know the things that I'd learned that were going to be a little bit better now for me than what I grew up with. I still run a successful business. I just run it differently, completely differently than what I did in the past. It doesn't make sense to try to be the smartest guy in the room. It just doesn't. I have this philosophy that no matter how smart you think you are, we are smarter than me. The collective behind all of us is going to have a better idea. And that's where it took into the writing, where I brought these 44 people on, plus the 6 people on my team to create a book. The audience that I ended up writing it for were actually the people that I do a lot of coaching work with now. Young professionals that are looking to aspire to the C-suite. People that are directors or vice presidents that want to get into the C-suite, or who most of my one-on-one coaching clients are, and come to find out that that's who this work resonated with. It was interesting. A good friend of mine, and I think Troy's on here, and I'll talk about Troy in just a minute. Troy Hoffman had 3 of his people come into a meeting with me, 3 young folks, right? One of them, I think, is only 19 years old. And they were going to start helping with some marketing and do some work with me. And we started talking philosophically. And the youngest person in that group, this young female, said, I love this topic. I love this stuff. No, it's not just for the 45-year-olds. Like, we need that too. So it really was heartening to hear that a young person was interested in leadership things as well. Leadership concepts that we'll talk about a little bit, and when I go through chapter by chapter, what the book is about. So I wanted to give you a little bit of information about the writing process, who it was for, why I wrote it, and the real reason why I wrote it is because I felt like I needed to get this story out. I needed people to hear it. It goes along with the podcast a partner and I do. It's called the CEO podcast, and that's a conversation between a couple of guys that run businesses and sitting around having a beer and talking shop and things. And we wanted others to hear that, so that we put this podcast out. And the podcast was actually the beginning of the writing of the book, saying this is really good content. The things that we're talking about, people need to hear. And whether you think I'm right or whether you think I'm wrong, it's another interpretation on what leadership looks like. One thing I want to be clear about here, there are no new ideas in this book. What I've done is I've taken things that don't seem like they might fit within a leadership context and started blending them together to create the transformation that happened for me. And I'm not a total fan of transformational leadership. Like, if you look at the definition of transformational leadership, which is idealized influence, individual consideration, inspirational motivation, and then intellectual stimulation, all 4 of those things I believe in. But one thing that transformational leadership does not talk about, that I find important, is the concept of team. That took an entire chapter in my book to talk about team. And in fact, there's a few that I think are can't miss chapters. I'm going to kind of just hit over the chapters real quick if you'll bear with me. So we start with my journey, right? The introduction is kind of what's in the book, and then my journey and all the mistakes that I made throughout my life, and the preconceived notions that I had that just weren't true, that just weren't what were going to lead me to where I want to be. And I'm not talking about financially, I'm talking about emotionally, spiritually, the whole person, right? Being the person that I wanted to be. And trust me, I haven't mastered them. I've been working on them for 13 years, but they're not mastered yet. These are works in progress. As we go through, you'll see that I make just as many mistakes as other leaders, but it's how we correct those mistakes and how we account for those that I think is the sign of a true leader. So in chapter 1, we talk about leadership. The book's broken down into 3 parts: theory, practice, and principles. In the first portion, the theory, we got to get through it, right? It's talking about what leadership is, and talks a little bit about the old school command and control leadership, and the new progressive leadership styles, be servant leader or authentic leader, or the transformational leader. And then my version of the transformational leadership, which includes the team version. In chapter 2, I think is probably the most important chapter in the book, and it's about trust. Building, developing trust. I believe this wholeheartedly. You cannot have a positive relationship without first having trust. You can have a relationship, it can be antagonistic, it can be all kinds of things, but without trust, you cannot have a positive relationship. And I'd love for somebody to take some notes and challenge some of these assumptions at the end, because I'd like to hear some difference of opinion on it as well. So chapter 3, we get into the difference between power and influence. So a lot of us get into these leadership positions and just feel the power. And that's just not the way to inspire folks, right? I can get people to act if I have more power than them, whether it's physical power or positional power, whatever that might be. I would be able to get somebody to act, but I would not be able to get their commitment. I can get compliance, but not commitment. And I think leadership's about getting commitment from your folks. So then we get into the practical applications of what I consider leadership. And the first chapter on that is on communication. Happens to be one of my favorite topics, being able to communicate. We think we do it really well, and I'm going to tell you we don't. There are so many problems in the world right now, all based on poor communication. Whether it's the other person not hearing me, or me not presenting it right. There's a theory that I have, and I believe this, and that communication is what the audience, what you hear and interpret. It's not what I say. And the book's going to be the same way. It's what you interpret from the book, not what I'm telling you it means, because you're going to apply these things in the way that you see best. So if we just did a better job of communicating and building trust, there's a really, really good start, right? The next section is, next chapter is on teams and the difference between a group and a team. But the word team is often misused. I mean, in fact, all groups are almost always, oh, my team and this, and people talking about my team there. And a team has different dimensions, right? A team is just deeper than a group. A group can be anybody. But a team requires a couple things. One of them is a shared sense of purpose, that we all have to be going after the same sort of thing. More important than that is that we need to be able to trust each other. Trust happens on a few different levels. There's something in the academic world called cognitive trust. I know that you're good at your job. I know that you're willing to do it. I trust that you're going to do it. That's a cognitive trust. There's something else called affective trust, and the affect, having affect for somebody, having care for somebody. A level that I can trust you with me, with my stuff, with my information, with my and that you have my best interest in heart. Having both levels of trust is where you're going to build a stronger and better team than you would otherwise. The next section happens to be on emotional intelligence. This is a subject, again, a lot of us think we're pretty good at. In fact, some of us are really good at it. We're pretty good at, and a lot of business leaders read the room. They see what they see, and they know what their audience is and how they're going to best respond. There are a lot of people that are pretty good at that. Where we often fall short, and this is where ego and hubris come in, is the self-reflection portion of emotional intelligence, understanding ourselves, how our emotions create our actions, then how those actions are interpreted by others based on the look in my face, the body language, all of those kind of things that I might be displaying that I have no idea that I am. I was just having a conversation with my son the other day, talking to him about his boss and some of the problems that he was dealing with his boss. And I said, Sean, it's incumbent upon you to bring that up to him. I'm pretty sure he doesn't know this is the interpretation. This is how you're receiving that. Very few of us want to be assholes. I mean, we just don't, right? Yet we come across that way often. Whether it's had a bad day, had a bad night's sleep, just got off a plane, whatever those emotions that end up hampering us. So in this emotional intelligence, we talk a lot about the cure for some of these things. Some of it is just time, right? Give yourself some time, count to 10, like mom said, take a deep breath, do some meditation, and learning some of these skills. And that's deep within this book as well. So now we get to the last part, which is the principles section of the book. 3 principles that I have found that have been vital in my journey. I've done pretty good at 2 of them, and I'm still struggling on the 3rd, and I'm working on it. All right. The 3rd is actually the first one in the book. And why I put it first is because I think it's really important. Just because I'm not good at it yet doesn't mean I don't need to work about that. And that's humility. So I happen to have somebody online right now that is my humility mentor. There's actually a story in the book about this gentleman. And, he will tell you all the things that's wrong with him, but I'm going to tell you, here's the thing that's right about him. And it's probably the most humble human being I've ever met that's had levels of success, right, as well. So Troy Hoffman, you're right in the middle of my screen, so I can't not see you. But there is this, and I actually got permission from Troy to use his name in the book because these are the kind of stories that make Troy cry. So it's really, I like doing that to him. But I want to introduce Troy really quick. Troy has a couple businesses going on. One of which is his newest venture is helping entrepreneurs formulate and form their business so that they can scale from the 0 to the 10 million range and maybe even above. So Troy, why don't you introduce yourself to the crowd here, if you would? I don't know if I can.
I feel like I know a lot of the names on here. There's only a few I don't recognize. And then some I know your names only from Scott talking about you on the Zoom right now that I can see the faces of. So I want to say hi, Shauna. Hi, Steve. We got some of our people on here, some of our friends, John, and a lot of these people know Scott and I's story very well, are very intimately involved in our highs and lows together and our growth process over, Scott, I think it's like 11 years now.
Yep.
I think it's 11, almost 12. So, and from the beginning to now, like these bumps and these journeys. So nice to meet everyone else that I don't know on here. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Troy. I appreciate that. I just saw Sarah pop up. So Sarah is a co-author. As I introduced her at the beginning, she came on as a developmental editor, but she put so much into this process that I couldn't help but put her name on the book along with me. In fact, there's a story I'm going to tell about Sarah that made my life more difficult. And that is, I've got 3 other chapters that I've written. They're in the book, and she kicked them out. She says, I like them, but they don't fit in this book. You better save them for a next one. So thank you, Sarah, for making my job another month and a half longer than it had to have been. I appreciate that. But honestly, Sarah made this a better book. So I want to give her a few minutes to talk just a little bit about her story.
Thanks, Scott. And hi to everyone, Steve, to Troy, anyone else that's hidden. Yeah, this was such a pleasure to work with Scott again on a number of levels. Number one, so I'm a former coaching client of Scott's. He was brought in to help our company with strategic planning several years ago, many years ago, and then we just kept working with him because he did such a great job. So did some personal one-on-one coaching with him as well. So the funny thing, I remember when I first started working with him, one of the things he said was, you cannot just take this course and then expect to be good at it. You're going to forget. And of course I did. So working on the book was a great crash course in kind of relearning all of the things that he's done through the one-on-one coaching and the company coaching he did with us. And then the other thing was just getting to be involved in this process and going back to my roots, which is, editing and writing and working with Scott on such a one-on-one level was really great. He really, throughout the process, demonstrated all of these principles. I for example, I went through a couple really big personal things, and he, I tried to hide them from him, but he could tell, like, for example, one of the things was, I was turning some stuff in late, and instead of, getting on my case and not attacking, but how some bosses can be that way. He took the time to find out what happened and gave me some breathing room and some space. And so it was nice to see him putting his principles into practice with me.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, 2 more chapters that we didn't talk about, and then we'll end it up. I'm going to leave this for some questions and answer period. So if you've taken some notes on things that you wanted to challenge or talk about, please don't be afraid to ask any question that you want to ask. I am an open book, right? Which gets to actually what's the last chapter, but the chapter before that has to do with empathy. Trying to understand, right? Understanding where people are coming from. And Sarah just told a little bit about, some of the work problems that we end up having, right? And getting to understand what the people's issues are, it's a lot easier to adjust to them. So there's a whole chapter about empathy in here. And then the last one is on vulnerability. Vulnerability is, and I've said this a few times in the past year or so, vulnerability is not something I grew up with. You grew up in my family of origin. If you were vulnerable, someone would put their foot on your neck so that they could be 6 inches taller. That's just the way it was when I was growing up, right? But what I found is that being vulnerable is probably the most attractive quality that I can have. When I started practicing, and you have to be in a safe spot to be able to do this, I get it. But when I started practicing being vulnerable, I would attract people to me, as opposed to coming to me because I'm so damn smart and I have all this great advice and all the things that I thought that I was, right? All that did is keep people at a distance until they needed something. When I learned how to become vulnerable, that's when people started coming towards me instead of staying away. I think it is such a trick. Now, Brene Brown talks about this, vulnerability without boundaries is insanity, right? You just can't be, spill your guts to everybody all the time. It's just not appropriate to do that. But what I'm being vulnerable is being willing to share both successes and failures, things that I wish I would have done differently. There's a lot of that in this book. And it's not just my stories. I use stories from my clients. I use stories, I already mentioned, there's a story about Troy in there that is really powerful. Clients, family, and friends as well. A lot of it is, this is a business book, no question about it, but I think it's a book about life. We talk all the time with our clients about, when they say, oh, I'm this way at work, but I want to be this way at home, right? 2 different personalities. And my question is why? Like, which one of those people do you like better? Oh, I like the person I am at home better. Well, good, do that. Be that person. Be that authentic person and be that everywhere. If it works at home, it's going to work in the workplace as well. And if it works in the workplace, I'm telling you this, especially when you get to the communication stuff. We talk about speaking truth to power. I've learned how to talk to my wife. I mean, that's power. And be able to say what I mean without having to say it mean. All right. So the concepts in this book work both at home and in the workplace. And honestly, in this new world that we're in right now, in the world that the younger generations in particular are not going to put up with the old Scott. They're just not going to. They're going to be leaving. They're going to be looking for a new job. They talk about there is no cradle to grave jobs anymore. And that's because we're not making the adjustments that we need to make in order to allow for those. I do think the longevity within a career could be better. If people are happy, they don't look for work. They don't look outside for the work if they're getting satisfied where they are. So I'm telling you, this is good stuff. It's a really self-reflective process, and I make you think, right? There's the way that I suggest reading the book is a chapter at a time. I don't care which chapter, read a chapter. I don't want you to read the book cover to cover. Take a day or a week to read a chapter and then do the exercises that we give you at the end of it. Something that we developed a few years ago with the help of one of my doctoral students was something called the concept matrix. Concept matrix is a very simple idea. You read a chapter, and then I ask you to write out what was the most impactful thing in that chapter that came to you. The second thing that I ask you to write out is, what do you think the author meant by that? And the third and the most important is, how can you apply this in your life? And I'm going to ask you to write it out. I have a strong belief, Troy's heard this a number of times, writing clarifies thought. And I'm not talking about writing 6,000 words. I'm talking about writing a sentence or two. It will help you clarify all that stuff that's circling around in your head with each of these concepts and each of these things. So writing clarifies thought. There is a concept matrix question at the end of each chapter. So what does this do for you? One, it helps you focus on what you're going to get out of that chapter. I know when I read a book, if I read it cover to cover, I get one idea out of that book. Right? You're going to get 9 out of this book because you're going to do them chapter by chapter by chapter. I want you to come up with 9 different ideas, right? And some of them are going to work for you and some of them aren't. But you get to decide how that works. There's also other exercises in here that'll tell you the types of leaders if you want to get put into a box, right? That you might be. Another one that there's 2 different quizzes. One is on team trust and one is on humility. Take those, see where you score. You're the only one that's going to see it, so there's no harm in doing this, but go ahead and take that. We'll give you a QR code. You can scan it and see what you like, see what you think, right? It's really simple. You get to decide on the things that you want to work on and the things that just aren't going to apply to you right now. All right, that's it. That's what the book's about. What I want to do is open this up, and I'm going to share my screen because I told you I'd show you a copy of the cover of the book, and I want to share the screen to do that. I hope I can. Share screen right there. And this one here. And can you see that? Copy of the book. The QR code that's on there is if you happen to have your phone, you want to buy a copy, go right there and buy a copy of the book right now as well. So I'm going to leave that up while we're doing the Q&A portion. So I'd like to open it up to anybody that is willing to be vulnerable enough to ask a question. And honestly, it could be something that challenges me, my thoughts and ideas.
Can I ask a question, Scott?
Yes, sir.
Scott, thank you for the opportunity for me to read a couple of the chapters before the book came out. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
One question you emphasized earlier is about the trust. Trust, is all about the relationship. It's all about trust. That's leadership is about.
Yeah.
The flip side, how do you develop a trust, especially in today's global business environment that has the people from different culture, different background, different business environment. In some context, the business people tend to trust people unless you prove otherwise. Yep. All other the context of people don't trust you until you prove otherwise. Can you share a little bit your perspective? What
Sure.
does it take to build trust?
So there's a lot in the book on trust and people's propensity to trust. Like you said, some people don't trust very easy and other people trust too fast, right? And there's danger in both of those. But the old school method of developing trust is to do what you say you're going to do enough times and people will start trusting you. That's how it used to work and still does in most cases. We've developed a theory that I've proven over and over and over again. And when we call it the circle of trust, and it's a 4-step process. And I believe if you do this 4-step process continually, you will build trust not only faster, but deeper. I'm going to give you those 4 steps right now. The first one is respect. And it's not the respect that my dad taught me. You know, your respect is earned, it's not given. I mean, and people have heard that, right? Respect is earned, it's not given. No, I'm talking about the type of respect for humanity, for the human dignity, the respect that I should be given to everybody. Start there. Start with respect. The next stop is a Stephen Covey concept, which is listen to understand. Where most of us listen to reply. While you're saying something, I'm already formulating my thought. And sometimes I'm going to step on your story. I'll give you an example. Let's say you and I, you were telling me about some recent vacation you went to, and you just got the words Costa Rica out of your mouth. I, with good intentions, trying to make a connection with you, might say something like, oh, Costa Rica, I've been there too. I've been there so many times. I've done this. Did you go here? Did you? I'm trying to make a connection with you, but I'm actually pushing you further away because I stepped on your story and I didn't listen to where you're coming from and what you had to say. Listening to understand the intentions and the meaning from the other person. So it's actually a great conflict mitigation tool as well. I don't have to fight, and I can disarm you really easy by taking the time to listen to you. The next step is something I learned in EO, which is called share from experience. In EO, they call it Gestalt language protocol, and all that meant is that we don't give advice. I might share a story about my life and how that felt to me that related to your story, without giving you the advice. You are a grown man, grown woman, a human all on your own. I do not need to tell you what to do. But my story might help you organize and comprehend and let you know that you're not alone. One thing that I've done that's really helped me more than any other is I've taken a word out of my vocabulary, the word should. It is pretty arrogant of me to tell you what you should do. I don't have your experience. I don't have your background. I don't have your problems. I don't have the consequences. For me to tell you what you should do, I could tell you what I might do in a similar situation, but sharing from my experience as opposed to telling you what you should do. And then the fourth step is delivering on the promise, which is the same as we've always done. Just keep doing what you say you're going to do over and over and over. This ends up being a cyclical kind of event. And it goes from, starting with respect, sharing from experience, or listening to understand, sharing from experience, and doing what you say you're going to do. You do that 3 times with somebody, you start to begin to develop that more respect, the kind that's earned, not just given, and which leads to trust, which leads to a relationship. That's how I think we should develop trust in the future. It's a communication process.
Okay, thank you. Well said.
Thank you. Who else?
I have a question.
Go for it.
So this is Shauna, by the way, and obviously you learned a lot and you share your experiences, but I was wondering, did you learn something about yourself while you wrote this book that surprised you?
I don't know that I learned anything new about myself that surprised me, but it forced me to go deeper into the practices that I preach. And my podcast did the same thing, right? If I say something out loud, I have to live up to it, or at least attempt to live up to it. And trust me, I don't always live up to it. I got my bad days just like everybody else has their bad days. But the process of writing the book helped reinforce to me that the direction that I'm going is right for me. It is a better way, in my opinion, to lead others, to get commitment rather than just compliance. And that commitment is what's going to drive the business forward, right? So it's still a business concept. It's not about just laying down and giving in and letting people do whatever they want to do, right? It's inspiration instead of motivation. It's commitment instead of compliance. That's what leadership's about. So what did I learn about this? It reinforced the things that I needed to continue to work on in order to embody the approaches that I believe will get me to where that dream I told you about, that vision of the future, when someday I will get there.
That's awesome. Thank you.
It takes work. It takes work. But all this stuff is simple. All the concepts I talk about are really simple. They're just not easy. Who else? Don't be shy. You're with friends.
I have a question. Hi, Scott.
Hello.
Hi, everybody. I am the 19-year-old, so I'm going to be bringing a little bit of a different perspective into this conversation.
You look like you're almost 21.
Thank you. But it's the only time being told that looking older is a compliment.
That's right.
But my question is, you were talking a little bit about kind of the bridge between, like, for example, my generation to your generation. And for me, I'm trying to learn how to understand the different, because it's very different. Like, my thought process is probably very different than the thought process of someone in your generation. And for me, in my perspective, I'm working for somebody who is in your generation, and I'm trying to learn how to build those two different types of trust that you discussed.
Yeah.
And I'm having a little bit of a difficult time understanding how my perspective on trust and how I understand it can translate through into my team and into my, like, with my boss, because it's not even just a matter of, it's just coming from two completely different generations, and that does have a pretty heavy effect on the way that things are communicated. So
Yeah.
I guess
Well,
that's kind of my question. Like, what's your opinion and approach on that? What do you think?
So my opinion is that often I see those of us who have a little more gray hair have an arrogant approach that we know more. And it's just not the case. We might know different things, but we don't know more, right? So this is kind of why I wanted to write to my folks, right? The people that look like me and are my age, to get them to understand, if we don't make the changes that I'm talking about in this book, we are going to lose people like you. You won't stick around and put up with it. You might try to conform at first because you say, oh, wise old guy, right? And hang out, what can I learn from him? Until it becomes too much of a burden. And you just don't feel good about it, right? So that's my opinion on the matter. We need to make the changes to allow for others to be inclusive and be with us. There's a whole concept on DEI right now, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that doesn't just, it just doesn't mean race and color or gender. It means age discrimination as well. And having an arrogant approach that I'm so much smarter than you is just not right. We need to make the change. So what can you do to influence that? Because I also believe this: every change that you want to make is 100% on you to make. Even if you want others to change. While you don't have control of others, you can have influence on others. So trust is a process of communication. In order to communicate, you need to speak in a language that the person understands. You need to learn to speak old white guy, right? If you want your message to be heard by this gentleman that you're talking about. We all have differences. Like if I go to Germany and I try to order dinner, if I don't have a picture in front of me, I'm not going to get dinner. If I don't speak the German's language, he's not going to get me what it is that I'm looking for. The same is true of us. If I want to get from you what it is that I want, I need to be able to speak a language that you resonate with. Knowing who the audience is the first portion of that. Being humble enough to be able to speak their language and not demand it's being spoken in yours is the next step. So can you influence that? Absolutely. The problem with all this, I say it's simple but not easy, is that I wish all this stuff was like a light switch. You say, oh, I got it. Turn the light switch on and it just starts working. It's more like a dimmer switch. It takes the work that we're talking about takes time. And it goes a little bit at a time. And here's the other thing that I try to talk to people about is that we're going to make progress. If we continue to work this path, you're going to make progress. And 2 steps forward and 1 step back is still progress. Trust me when I say I've only been working on this 13 years and I've had 50 years of being the other guy. I still go back there sometimes, not on purpose, but because it's part of the nature, right? How you correct and recover from those missteps is how you're going to be viewed positively in the future. So my thought to you is, what is the language that your boss speaks? so that he can hear what it is that you are trying to get across. Might take some work.
Thank you, Scott.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
This is Steve Williams. I just had a thought on that last little conversation, and I wonder, like, if there's an opportunity using vulnerability to bridge that gap in communication between generations.
Well,
Like, for example, like, I'm not understanding what you're saying. Is this right?
yeah.
What are your thoughts there, Scott?
So my thoughts are really simple. And again, this, I mean, I could put this into the conflict resolution concept as well. And that is, and this is the listening to understand being more important than sharing from experience. That's why it comes before, listening comes before sharing. Listening doesn't just mean with your ears. It also means with your eyes, and it can also mean with your mouth. Listening to someone is saying, help me understand. That doesn't make sense to me. Can you tell me more? Right? That is a vulnerable position, as you said, but is also one that draws people towards you because you're actually caring about what they have to say. So here's my thought on that, though. You know, I've had customers before that say, oh gosh, I need to be able to say what I want. I can't just always listen and hear what they want. Just because I'm listening to you doesn't mean I agree with you. That's one. But the other one is, what I believe happens is, even in a hostile situation, if I've given you the grace to really try to understand you and where you're coming from, 9 times out of 10, actually 9.5 times out of 10, you are going to give that grace back to me at some point. And I'm going to tell you where it doesn't work, the 0.5 times. 5% of the studies show that 5% of the population are either narcissistic or sociopathic. This stuff doesn't work on them. Frankly, they don't care. And you may come across those people, but it's a small minority of people. Not everyone that acts the way I used to act when I was 49, right, is a narcissist or a sociopath. We just haven't been exposed and we haven't heard it yet. We haven't learned it yet. Quick story on this lifelong learner that's reading a bio. John wrote my bio for me, but reading my bio, it says, oh, Scott DeLong, a lifelong learner. When I got through with the book, I promised myself I was going to do something. I was going to learn Spanish, right? Here I am, got a doctorate, been in school a long time, done all this kind of stuff, really smart guy. Oh my gosh, is this a struggle? I'm taking Spanish classes 3 times a week, practicing in between, because it's something I want to learn. And I'm intimidated by this young man in Nicaragua, right, that I've got to go face. So this lifelong learning process is a humbling experience as well. So keep doing it. It's good for you. Steve, I don't know if that got to your question, but I agree. I think vulnerability goes a long way. Add that to humility, right? And these vulnerability, humility, and empathy, those principles kind of coexist. If you see somebody usually that is good at 2, they're probably kind of working on the 3rd one anyway. Who else? Any questions from Utah?
I have a question about the book title, I thought I was a leader. So when you're not a leader, what are you then?
I try to be a leader all the time. But there's times where I need to be the follower, certainly. The reason the book title was I thought I was a leader, Sarah, can I give this away? There's a line in the book. Talks about, in my journey portion, the line is this: I thought I was a leader. Turns out I was just an asshole. So sometimes that's what I am, right? To be a leader, you need to have people that are willing to follow. To have followers, you can't be an asshole. At least for long.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed the time that we spent together. We're going to get you out of here, and let's someone wants to come up with some more questions, because I'm an open book. I'm here to answer anything that you want to hear.
Hey, Scott, real quick.
Congratulations, Scott. Sorry,
Oh.
Mike. I just want to say congratulations, Scott, before you drop off.
Thanks, Troy.
I bought my book. I already went on Amazon just now. I scanned me. I bought the book. I can't wait to come by and get it autographed and fly in to go see Sarah wherever in the world you're living now and get it autographed by you too. And Scott, I got pages of notes. This is
Great.
good.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Troy.
you become elite, man. You become elite.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Mike, what'd you have to
No,
question?
I just wanted to say, you talk a lot about, kind of your self-reflection journey.
Yeah.
I guess I was trying to understand what were the, the markers, or, when did you know that, kind of the way you were was the problem?
It happened. It actually, the biggest thing that happened to me in the sports world, where it really hit me in the face. It had happened along the way, and looking back, I could tell you. In fact, some of those stories are in the book. But the day that it happened was I started playing tennis at about the time I was 45. I wasn't a tennis player, and so I wasn't very good. But like anything else, I was going to go be successful, right? I'm going to keep playing and do this until I became, and I got pretty good, pretty fast. A lot of practice. I was playing 7 days a week, sometimes 2 matches a day. So I'm probably playing 10 matches per week plus practicing. So I got to be fairly good. Well, I did the local tennis club just down the hill. I started getting phone calls from these people like, "Hey, Scott, can you come play? My partner's out," right? Getting all these people that wanted me to be around. And it was great. I thought I'd found my tribe. It felt really good to have these people calling me to say, "Hey, come hang out with us, come play with us," right? I hurt my knee, and had surgery. Got back on the court within 3 weeks because I was addicted. I was addicted to the adulation. I was addicted to the game. I was addicted to the fun, the friends, all of that kind of stuff. I heard it again in week 5. 2 weeks later, I just blew it out again, like into my tennis career. And the first thing that I realized after the withdrawal, because I couldn't go to the tennis court and play anymore, is that my phone wasn't ringing. What that meant to me was that people were around me for what I could do for them, not because of who I was. That hit me hard, right? It was, and it happened all my life, in the business world, in the sports world, in the education world. When I could do things for people, the phone would ring. When I could no longer do them for them, the phone wasn't ringing. And that was the realization then that I needed to make a change to become the person that I wanted to become. And come to find out, the person that I wanted to become is a better business leader anyway. So that was my big aha moment, was the phone stopped ringing because I was no longer valuable.
Thanks.
Don't wait for that to happen to you. I'm saying, right? Find out. It was painful. It was a painful lesson. All right. Anybody else? Well, I appreciate you sticking with us that long. I didn't look at the chat to see if there's any questions on there that people are being shy about. Let me look really quick. All right. Well, my contact information is really easy. Scott@leadtogoals.com. I like talking. I like answering questions. Read the book, challenge me. I love learning, right? I think one thing that I was thinking about this today is that politicians get a bad rap when they flip-flop. They go from this position to that position, right? And I think just the opposite. I think they've learned something, and therefore they're willing to change their opinion. If I'm just doing it based on public opinion, that's one thing. But the more I learn, the smarter I get. The smarter I get, the better decisions I can make. And they might be different than the ones that I used to make, and that's okay. All right. Well, thank you all. I appreciate you hanging out with me.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
All right.
Congrats, Scott. Congrats, Sarah.
Thank you.
Hi, Scott. Congratulations.
Thank you, Troy.
Good luck with it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. You're awesome.
Thanks, Taylor. I appreciate that. Don't tell me I'm awesome. I'm working on the humility thing.
Balance, yin and yang.
I need
You have
more
to
work
have
on
a
that.
little bit of cocky confidence in order to be powerful as well.
Well, I think confidence it's not the antithesis of humility. I think it's okay to be confident and humble.
Correct.
So this is why I point to Troy. But I think he's both.
Yes, he is. I agree. So are you.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your Tuesday.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm going to stay on as long as anyone's on. So you pipe up if you want or hang up if you want, your choice.
I'm piping in. You're a game changer.
Oh,
And
thank
I'm
you.
so excited for this book. I took some time to download it onto Kindle through my iPad, but Scott, this is something that I am going to purchase and get to a lot of people that I work with in that generation of the 19-year-olds, because this is something that's going to help, and it helps me. So thank you so much. I'm very excited for this, and I appreciate everything that you've done for so many people that I work with.
Thank you, Terry.
You're welcome. Good night.
Good night. All right. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Good to see everybody. Have a good rest of
Can't
your
wait to
day.
read it.
All right. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.